Hi there, this is Elise Bennin, your marketing mentor. And this is the podcast for you if and only if you are ready to leave the feast or famine syndrome behind, and I mean for good. All right, I am trying something new today because I've been doing a lot of reading at the moment, nonfiction as well as fiction. The nonfiction I'm reading is called How to Not Know by Simone Stolzoff, highly recommended. And fiction, I just finished This Is Not About You by Allegra Goodman. And that's what I want to talk about today. I love this book, which I discovered in The New Yorker when I read a story, which is actually a chapter in this book. It was called Deal Breaker. And what I love about Allegra Goodman's writing is that it's about all the things people don't say. She surfaces these thoughts in the back of your head. You may see what I mean as I go on to talk about my favorite chapter or story in the book, which is actually, the book is a cross between a collection of stories and a novel. I think she calls it serialized stories because they're all connected. They're all about a family. Each chapter or story is told from the perspective of a different member of the family. It's so interesting. So we see the whole family from many angles. And I love this idea because when I studied writing in New York with Philip Schultz, he founded the Writers Studio. And one of the many things he taught me was how to listen for the voice of the narrator. He taught that the narrator's voice is always more important than the writer's voice. In fact, he believes that you can find your voice as a writer by inventing other voices, which in turn help you find other aspects of yourself, which then informs your own voice. It's really a beautiful idea that I've carried with me ever since I studied with him. That was in the late 90s, before I wrote any books, actually. And I have learned to apply this idea to all of my own writing and even to marketing. But I digress. Anyway, thanks to Phil Schultz. Thank you, Phil, out there. I learned how to read fiction, and it's one of the reasons I immediately loved this story from Allegra Goodman. And the title of the chapter or the story is a dollar sign, literally, which I also love because it is about money. In fact, I want to read you the first paragraph. She says, "In this family, you didn't talk about money, not even with euphemisms, the way you spoke of cancer, she is very sick, or a disastrous get-together, it was very nice, or unforgivable behavior, it's not my business. Dan and Steve were silent when they inherited equal shares of their mother Jean's estate. It was just the way they had been raised. Talking about money was rude and somehow dangerous." I think a lot of people feel this way. In fact, I read that paragraph aloud yesterday to a designer who is one of my coaching clients because he was telling me about a negotiation with one of his new clients. And he said, if I hadn't brought up the topic of money, she wouldn't have either. And we all know what happens when you let that happen, right? It never ends well. But then he said, I know I should be better about talking about money. And I pushed back on that because we really can't say should about this. It's the way it is. Many people just don't like talking about money, and that includes your clients, by the way. And so to prove it to him, I read him that first paragraph of dollar sign. But this story, again, I digress. This story is also a story about a ghostwriter who gets ghosted, kind of, or who thinks he's been ghosted and who hates talking about money. So I just thought it would be perfect for the podcast. It just has so many elements that you, dear listener, will recognize in yourself. So that's why I thought I would try something new today and share it with you here. And if it works, maybe I'll do more of this. I don't know. Let me know if you like it. So let's see what else I want to share. Okay, here's another paragraph. So Steve, is the protagonist. Of course, Steve was trying to find work, but after 25 years editing composition textbooks, he was highly specialized. He had applied for jobs in publishing, libraries, research institutes, and nonprofits, but his skills were old school and his habitat had dwindled. His interviews were informational at best. He was working intermittently with a cheerful, tattooed headhunter named Charlotte, who specialized in creatives, as people like Steve were now called. The first time they'd met, Steve said, "I'm not sure I like being an adjective turned into a noun." I love that, an adjective turned into a noun. And I guess I also tend to use the word creatives that way too these days. So this is making me rethink my own jargon. And maybe I shouldn't shorten creative professionals to creatives. Is that laziness? Do you think of yourself as a quote unquote creative? Just something to think about. But this story is about Steve, who is an older man in the publishing industry, but not ready to retire. But the industry itself is dying or at least changing. Sometimes it's hard to say which. And one interesting thing there is that certainly publishing, as it has always been, is changing. And one thing this story crystallized for me, actually, is how publishing has gone from being focused on readers, writing for readers for the most part, and selling books to readers, to maybe now and in the future being more focused on authors, people who have something to say. More about that later. So anyway, through networking, yes, little wink, wink there, Steve does some networking and reconnects with his old college roommate, Jeff, who now runs an indie publishing company. And it says, quote, "Old as he was, Steve tried networking the old-fashioned way." And that's how he found Jeff, who is a playwright, actor, beer pong champion. Jeff had been Steve's freshman roommate, and they had been close. It was only after the implosion of Steve's entire industry that reaching out began to feel humiliating. Steve had not contacted Jeff in years, and now he thought, I cannot do this. But he forced himself to write to him anyway. So Steve sends Jeff this really long email. It's like a credo, a manifesto, really, about what he believes about art and writing. But as his wife points out, he never actually asks for anything. He just suggests meeting for coffee sometime. And I quote again here. After shoveling the walk and driveway, Steve checked his inbox. Nothing. No reply for several hours. He did not hear back from Jeff all day. The next morning, it snowed again, but just a little. Steve dug out the car for Andrea, that's his wife, and touched up the driveway. He didn't have to shovel perfectly, but it felt good once he started. He scraped off every bit of ice. Then he stamped inside, kicked off his boots, and reread his credo. It was indeed grandiloquent, and he saw a typo, outage, where he meant to say outrage. His message did seem bloated, and he had not, in fact, asked Jeff directly about employment. He'd only suggested meeting sometime for coffee. It was all too long, too weird, and at the same time, way too subtle. Jeff wasn't going to answer this. But no, that evening, Jeff Rosenkrantz wrote back, "Hi, Steve. Great to hear from you. Your email comes at such a great time. Our little outfit is expanding." So, turns out, right, he's unknowingly, Allegra Goodman has unknowingly proved my point that timing is everything when it comes to marketing and self-promotion. And it turns out that Jeff's indie publishing company serves people who want to self-publish a book, and he desperately needs good writers because, again, it turns out most people who want to write a book can't really write. Note to all you ghostwriters out there, and really anyone serving the self-publishing market, book coaches and book designers and editors. There's a big market and it's growing. All right, let me read more here. This is from the conversation with Jeff. Jeff says, and I quote, "Work has been insane. Your message could not have come at a better time. I need good people desperately. We have so many books scheduled, we cannot keep up. Steve said, well, that's good to hear. Yeah, I know you think people aren't reading anymore, said Jeff, and you're right, they're not, but everyone's writing like crazy. So for self-publishing, we're riding a wave. What happens when it breaks? Jeff smiled. I hear you, but that's just it. There's always another story coming. There is so much creativity out there, it's scary. You've seen our website. So they go on, and Jeff offers him an opportunity, and Steve agrees to do a trial project, 1,000 words. Although, of course, no one mentions money. Is it spec work? Will he get paid? Who knows? But his assignment is to take a section of a very badly written memoir and make it better. But not better for the reader, better for the author. The author is the client, and that's who has to be happy. All right, and so here again, quoting from Jeff, he says, look, everybody has a story, Jeff said, but not everybody has the words. He held up the obstetrician's memoir, which was titled Baby Doc. Production is only a small part of what we do. The writing is the most rewarding and the most time-consuming. So that's why you're hiring? We need wordsmiths, Jeff said. Frankly, we need poets and novelists, storytellers, people who can take the rough ideas and spin straw into gold, Steve ventured. Jeff did not take offense. Exactly. And so much of this story is about Steve's work on this trial project. He works hard on it. He feels really good about it. He sends it off, and Jeff responds quickly with a text that says, you nailed it, sending a contract. So, of course, he's very excited and he feels good about himself. But then he tells his wife, and I want to read that part to you. He says, I got it, he told Andrea, who had finished work and was now lying on the couch. What? She said. Amazing. They're sending me a contract. For how much? I mean, I don't know the details. I was just wondering what kind of job it is. Like, do you get paid by the project or do you get a salary? I said, I don't know yet. You didn't even ask, did you? Very typical, right? And then he gets another message from Jeff. And here I'll read again. His phone was buzzing. A text from Jeff. Call me. Uh-oh. Steve's mood changed instantly. What happened? Not good. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Something's wrong. Calling back, he paced the kitchen while Jeff's phone was ringing. Steve, Jeff said, as though everything was fine. Hi, Steve answered, trying to match Jeff's tone. So this is just a bump in the road. You charlatan, Steve thought. You con artist. You aren't going to pay me. But he said, what is it? Our client. Jeff lowered his voice, and suddenly he sounded like a Subaru service person. She has a few issues. Steve tensed. What do you mean? Okay, listen. First of all, I want to reassure you, this is very normal. It's just some questions, and they are all totally doable. The author wants to know why you are writing in the present tense when this book happened in the past. It's the historical present, said Steve. I know that, and you know that, Jeff said. Next, she wants to know, why is it so harsh? Because they were living in the shtetl in poverty. Yeah, but she says she wants the tone to be more cozy. Cozy? Steve glanced at Andrea in the kitchen. This is supposed to be nonfiction. I'm just talking about tone. She wants it sweet and cozy. Like sepia-toned rose-colored glasses? Exactly. Nonfiction, but not real either? Bingo. Who is this person? She's the author, Jeff said, and this is what she wants. So he reworks it and makes it cozy, and he sends off the second draft, and then he waits, and then he waits, and I want to read you the waiting because it's hysterical. Quote, however, he did not hear from Jeff all day, or the next day either. 2 more days passed, and Steve began to understand something. The author might not find his work so charming. She might detect the tiniest bit of fakery and mania and drunkenness, mockery. Clearly, this was the one thing you could not do. This was the unspoken rule. You had to take your author seriously. He wrote to Jeff, just checking in, no answer. He wrote again, You know, Jeff, I don't have time to write entire books on spec. If this is how you treat your so-called writers, but he did not send that one. 5 full days passed. Andrea said, look, it's a blessing in disguise. He even actually finds a teaching job while he's waiting for Jeff's response. That's how long it takes. But eventually, Jeff does respond. And here's the response. Steve is saying he slept well and woke refreshed. Even as his coffee brewed, he sat at the table to rework his resume. And that was when he saw Jeff's message with 2 attachments. One was a contract. The other was a 352-page document titled Gramma Fagala, a Memoir. Steve, sorry about the delay. Author had cataract surgery, but we are good to go. Jeff, Steve said when he reached his old friend on the phone. Hey, I assumed when I didn't hear from you. No, I'm sorry this took so long. I'm totally behind. She liked it? Loved. She is ecstatic. It's exactly what she was dreaming of. Okay. Let's see. Oh, yeah, we're almost to the end, and I don't want to read the end, but I'm going to read a little bit more here. Loved it. She is ecstatic. It's exactly what she was dreaming of. I'm not sure I can keep this shit up for 300 pages. You're too modest, Jeff said. Listen, I'm starting a full-time job soon, Steve said. Not a problem. We are totally flexible. That's the beauty of this line of work. Steve gazed at his computer with both memoir and contract on his screen. The book contract was for almost as much as his car repair. I don't think I can commit just now. Take your time, said Jeff. Just take a day or 2. Meanwhile, I'll put you in touch with Ruth. Who's Ruth? Your author. She's delightful. She's 86 and smart as hell. I just don't know if I can spread myself so thin, said Steve. What he meant by that was, oy vey, how are you suggesting such a paltry sum of money for this kind of aggravation? But Jeff did not take the hint. It doesn't have to be either or. Well, Steve countered, it can be both and. Never say die, Steve said. Exactly. And here's the thing to remember. There's a lot more where this came from. That's almost the end. I'm not going to read the end. You'll have to read it for yourself to find out what Steve decides to do. But one message here that I hear is that the self-publishing industry is growing. So if anything you do can serve that industry, it really is worth exploring. Anyway, that was fun for me. That's all I wanted to do. I hope you enjoyed it too. And we'll see if I do more. And if you want my help figuring any or all of this out, you can always take advantage of my free mentoring session. You can find that and lots more resources to market your own services, whatever they are, including my simplest marketing plan at marketing-mentor.com. So enjoy, and I'll see you next time.